Hi, everyone. I'm Karen McMullen, and I am a features programmer at Doc NYC. And we're here today with the filmmakers Justin Feltman and Razi Jafri from Hamtramck USA. Hi, guys.
How's it going?
Good.
Morning.
Good.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. We don't know what time it is when this appears in Zoom land, but it's morning here, right? How are you guys?
Good, how are you doing?
Doing really well. So let's
Yeah.
talk about your film. It's really unique. I really enjoyed your piece. You covered the big topic of election, but you scaled it down to a really heartwarming. I found it a very heartwarming piece on the inner workings of elections in an American small town. So curious to know how you guys came to this. Razi, I know that you were an engineer in your previous life. Justin, you work in nonprofit video, but you guys have come together to do this. Can you talk about how you joined forces?
Sure. Yeah, I came to Detroit during the 2016 election. I was looking for a project around underrepresented voices in American democracy, and I met Razi through a friend, and he had introduced me to several activists in the community. And after the election, we were stewing the next day, and we really wanted to make a project together, and we really wanted to put out something that would be a more fair and accurate representation of the Muslim community in America. And Hamtramck was right there, and we pretty much immediately got started. I left all my film equipment with Razi. I said, start shooting. And yeah, we just dove into it full bore. And I moved there for about 6 months leading up to the election, and just kind of ate, slept, and worked Hamtramck every day.
Yeah, that summer of 2016, I had just completed a documentary photography and photojournalism fellowship called Documenting Detroit. And then, as Justin mentioned, we met in the fall and started collaborating together, and that's when the idea came about. So we were both looking to work on a new project, and Hamtramck being America's first Muslim majority city, and sort of retaining and capturing a lot of the storylines that were part of the 2015-2016 election campaign cycle. The city being an immigrant majority city and a Muslim majority city, embodying a lot of what we consider to be the best parts of America.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing I'd add to that too is we had also talked about how a lot of the coverage around the city didn't seem to tell the story right. It gave into a lot of sensationalist elements, a lot of this fear mongering and everything. And we're like, all right, this is a city that has something incredibly beautiful that people are missing, and we really felt needed to be shared.
So how much did the growth of Islamophobia in America influence your decision to make the film?
I would say quite a bit. I'm an American Muslim. I'm a practicing Muslim, and it's profoundly frustrating to see the representations of Muslims in the media, and that's not just popular media. That's also in journalism and academia, and so it behooves us to try to better understand this community, because it's a growing community. It's America's most diverse religion. And so it cuts across every ethnic and socioeconomic, category and line. And also it's better for our own future, for us to understand one another. And so, we definitely felt like that was a big motivation for wanting to work on this film.
Yeah, as you know, America loves to we pride ourselves on being a nation of immigrants, and that's our party line. But the subtext is we like the right kind of immigrants, which happen to usually be the white kind of immigrants. So can you talk about the additional struggles that Muslim immigrants have when they come to this country?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of the it's part of the post 9/11 reality. in terms of the war on terror culture and the culture that the war on terror has sort of grown and proliferated across the country. And so I think it doesn't create a particularly welcoming environment. Now, at the same time, you have the geopolitics of the Middle East, growing tensions, revolutions, uprisings, and the kind of spread across the entire region, which has caused massive displacement. So now you have a group of people who are already being viewed with suspicion, prejudice, biases, both racial and religious biases. And so at the same time, these people really need, help and place to go. And so, you kind of have all of these things sort of coming together. There's also a type of racialization that has taken place with Muslims in America. With this idea of Islamophobia, which has very little to do with Islam. I mean, the Islamophobes that are out there, they really don't have a basic understanding of Muslim tenets or doctrines. It's a type of racialized prejudice. So even something like Islamophobia is a type of racialized prejudice, even though Muslims aren't a race. But it's the sort of most charged social ill in our society, and it's through the lens by which we view other communities and foreign communities and so on and so forth. The last thing I'll say is that this idea has permeated, probably since the 1960s and 70s because of the geopolitics of the time, that Muslims are foreigners, they're new to America, when in fact there's an unbroken chain of Islam being practiced from the time of the transatlantic slave trade. So I think there's this sort of adulteration of the narrative of who Muslims are, how long they've been here, where they come from, so on and so forth. And again, coming back to your previous question of, this is why it's important to tell stories like this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know that Muslims had been here this long. Thank you.
Yeah, about a third of the slaves that were brought, to America, were West African, and that's just part of our history.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. So let's talk about politics. We're in the middle of our own larger national election cycle. Talk a little bit about the similarities and the differences you see in the small town one versus the national. Yeah.
Well, there's the expression that all politics are local. That I think at the end of the day, even national campaigns, a lot of the get out the vote efforts are still going door to door, just like in Hamtramck. It's still showing up, showing people that you have something to vote for. And that you're in Hamtramck, although it's this very diverse community, a lot of people's desires are better roads, better schools, better very material needs that exist right in front of you, right outside your front door. And I mean, that's something that I think that whether on a national scale or even just a small town like Hamtramck, is really key to getting people to come out for you and vote for you. Has to do with how can you address people's immediate needs.
Yeah, and I think in any election cycle, there's kind of a macro story and a micro story, and often the micro story is quite telling, and it can serve as a bellwether for what's happening in other places around the country. One of the things that Justin and I always talk about when we talk about the film is how Hamtramck in many ways is, of course, very unique. It's very quirky, as you see from the film, but at the same time, it does represent a national trend, a more diversification in our demographics that's happening faster and faster due to all kinds of reasons that we don't necessarily have time to get into in this conversation, but Hamtramck happens to be a city with a large Yemeni population and a large Bengali population. There's places across America that have large Chinese American populations or large Mexican American populations. And so, part of it is a micro conversation about what's specifically happening in these towns, but then there's a broader conversation about what's happening in towns all across America. So any politician, like you see, you know, a politician like Karen, who's very savvy and very shrewd and strategic, one has to be informed about these trends, and one has to get to know these communities to understand what their needs are. Often those needs are the same as the general population, you know, but I think it behooves us, particularly those that are interested in politics, in understanding, you know, how America is changing.
So let's talk a little bit about the interpersonal dynamics that went on during the campaign. Some of your footage on your website, your fundraising footage, shows a little more contentiousness than we see in the feature film. But generally, I get the sense that there was some, you know, fair play, civility, some mutual respect going on there. Can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the campaign, I think there was a lot of people that were trying in earnest to represent the city and find a new path forward that kind of more or less stuck to the policies and kind of differences that they felt they could offer in a different approach than the current candidates or the current mayor or city council. And yeah, I think those differences stayed mostly clean. I mean, you know, there's still tensions, but you know, I would say most of it was in earnest, and came naturally. It didn't get into kind of the mudslinging you see a lot of times on a national scale.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, that's a really good point. You know, I mean, I think, you know, one of the things that we always like to sort of bring up as a rhetorical question almost is, you know, looking at what, you know, what does democracy look like in America's first Muslim majority city? Now, if the presumption in that question is that democracy is one of our most sacred institutions, if not our most sacred institution, and if Muslims are one of the most suspicious communities in America, so what does democracy look like in their hands? And one of the things that we want to highlight, you know, through the course of this film, is that it looks like democracy in really any other city. You know, is the contentiousness in a place like Hamtramck any more, you know, or any less than, you know, a town in New Jersey or a town in Texas? I don't know, you know, probably not, you know. And so we've certainly seen our share of, you know, infighting, corruption, right, you know, in the American political landscape all across the country and throughout our history. And so I don't think that there's anything particularly unique about the political theater of Hamtramck.
The other thing I would add to that is, you know, there were a few, we'll say, gaffes from different candidates. And that's what we kind of wanted to highlight in the trailer. But when it came down to actually building a film out, nothing really came of those gaffes. Like everyone just kind of was like, yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and just kind of let it go. And so it was kind of a you know, it was no way to really put it into the film without, you know, feeling like it's very isolated and odd, and it feels kind of awkwardly placed in there.
Yeah, and then
there were several things that were said that, you know, the community forgave pretty quickly and moved on.
Yeah, I mean, I think also as storytellers, there's, you know, you're sort of telling a story from your perspective, which, yeah, you know, has a sort of filter of truth and untruth on it, you know, but at the same time, you know, you don't want to try to create something that's not there, you know, and you want to try to tell a story that's as accurate as possible and true to the people, and try to honor the people that are, you know, give you the privilege of letting you into their lives, you know, to be able to tell that story. And so, you know, that's another point. Just wanted to add to that.
Well, that definitely came across, and you know, thank you for that authenticity and that, you know, just a refreshingly honest portrayal of candidates without trying to create villains and heroes where none exist. Everybody's just doing their best. How is the new majority Muslim city council faring?
Well, Hamtramck has had a Muslim majority city council since I think 2013, right, Justin?
15.
2015, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, nothing particularly remarkable or nothing particularly shocking either. I think a place like Hamtramck, which is a city that has been under state receivership, it has under the state of Michigan, under the emergency management laws, and so there's a lot of things that the city just kind of has to deal with around bigger issues around roads and clean water and taxes. And, it has seen a massive outmigration, particularly in the 1960s through the 1990s. And so rebuilding the community, making it more viable to businesses, appealing to more businesses to come in, inviting artists and young people to move into the town. These are some of the things that have been kind of a priority for the city to really kind of reestablish itself and to build a beautiful community. One of the things that's happened over the last 25 or so years is that when the Polish community left Hamtramck due to job losses, plant closures, things like that, completely understandable, but it left a massive vacuum, an economic vacuum and a housing vacuum. There were tons of, vacant, foreclosed, abandoned homes. And it was the Bengali and Yemeni immigrants that moved into Hamtramck, many from overseas, but also many from places like Jackson Heights and Queens, in New York and places like that, moving to Hamtramck to be able to buy a house and have some land and maybe start a business, because it's just more affordable to do that here. If it was not for that in-migration, Hamtramck would have a very different situation right now and a very different reality. Detroit has two cities inside of its proper boundaries, Hamtramck and Highland Park, and they've had completely divergent realities. Hamtramck has slowly grown its tax base and population due to this in-migration, and also refugee resettlement as well. In the 90s, there was a massive resettlement of refugees from Bosnia during the Balkan Wars. And then in more recent years, there has been resettlement of Muslims, of refugees from Central Africa, from the Middle East, particularly from Iraq and Yemen. And so, I think having a Muslim majority city council has probably just brought some cultural sort of differences, to how the city's run. But I think the priorities are still the same: education, healthcare, clean, better roads, better environment.
Yeah, the one thing I'd add to that is, as Razi kind of hinted, this isn't like a new city, so they've inherited decades-old issues. This is a working class town. I think it's one of the poorest in Michigan, and so they didn't get like a starting from zero kind of city, a day one kind of city. And, so they've inherited a lot of those issues. And also I'd say that it is a little bit of a misnomer to call it like the Muslim majority city council, because inside the city, you don't organize on religious lines. There's a Yemeni political action committee, there's a Bengali political action committee, but there's no Muslim political action committee that works in Hamtramck. And so, sometimes they may vote on similar lines, but I don't think that it would be fair to say that, they've made any policies in respect to religion or, or as a religious group, they come together on those lines. They definitely organize separately. And that was one of Fadl's, concerns from the beginning, is he's an Iraqi. He is Muslim, but he is from Iraq, and there's no really Iraqi community. So he had to pull from every single group that lives in the city to really find his path to victory.
Interesting. Well, thank you both for coming on and talking with me today. And thank you again for sharing your really awesome film with Doc NYC. I'm sure the audience enjoyed it, and hope to see you guys again soon in real life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you,
and obviously we wish that we could have been there in person with everybody else to have this experience, but next year, hopefully. So,
Yeah.
Hopefully next year. Thanks, Justin.
So,
Thanks, Razi.
thank you.
take care. Bye, Karen.
Bye.